starting with that piece of maths from Donald Trump at the outset of the episode, that $100 million has been spent on condoms in Gaza, and you think they're 10 cents each, that's 10 condoms a dollar, that's 1 billion condoms for Gaza. And you think, it's all nuts. It really is all nuts. And yet so many of the claims over what is happening to one of America's really important government departments, USAID, is based on apparently total bullshit numbers and bullshit inventions over what the organisation is doing around the world.
Yeah, and the reason we're talking about USAID, which is the Agency of International Development, obviously the acronym smells AID, is because it has been the top target for Trump and Elon Musk in terms of cutting what they call wasted government spending. This is an agency that was started back in '61 by JFK, an independent agency in the belief that America's security was pretty much tied to the prosperity, to the stability of other poorer countries. This, I guess, a sort of rising tides theory. If they're doing better, we'll be safer. And it was meant originally to counter Russian and Chinese influence. And Musk and Trump came in, Trump on day one, and said, right, we're putting a 90-day freeze on all payments going out. That includes things like $20 million on life-saving HIV treatment. And the person who is really pleased to see this happen, really pleased to see the freeze on payments, just FYI, is the former Russian President Medvedev.
It is amazing what's happened in the last 24 to 48 hours and since the weekend, because obviously all of our attention was on those tariffs. But I think in so many ways, this was the real story for two reasons. I mean, aid obviously is important in and of itself. The US is, just by virtue of the size of its economy, pretty much the biggest donor in cash terms that there is around the world. It gives out $44 billion worth of aid in the last fiscal year. Countries which are suffering from disease, starvation, places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan, the list goes on and on. So it matters for that because all of that stuff, or a lot of that stuff, is now just stopping. But it also matters because it's telling us something about what is happening to the US federal government in the era of not just Trump, but Trump/Musk. And there is this theory in political science called state capture. And we've seen it happen in other countries when you've got a new regime come in and you have either the regime itself or sometimes close allies of the regime, particularly rich people, go in and start to take over the mechanisms of the central government itself. And to some extent, and I don't want to be hyperbolic about it, but to some extent that is what we've seen over the course of the last 72 hours. Musk and his lieutenants, often young guys under 30, have done exactly what they did with Twitter when he took over. He's gone in at the weekend when no one else is there, no one's working there. He's gained access to classified material. He's taken away people's security passes of the civil servants who work there, and in the process gained sensitive details about millions of Americans and taken control of the payment system that manages the flow of trillions of dollars of government spending. And we don't know, the key point is, we don't know exactly what he's doing, how he's doing it, and really, apart from Trump, on whose authority he's so doing.
So this is the key question, because you can have an intellectual argument, and it's happened in Britain, over whether the Department for International Development should be a freestanding department or be part of the Foreign Office. It is now part of the Foreign Office, and something similar seems to be happening in the US right now, where the State Department is incorporating USAID. Fine. Let's have a kind of process where this happens. What literally happened at the weekend was that Musk and his lieutenants arrive at this building, they take over the building, they sweep past security, they deny the security people access to certain key areas of the building, and they lock people out of their computers. They have access to people's social security numbers. They also have, as you said, Lewis, the names of the contractors who are doing government contracts. And you could imagine that Elon Musk might quite fancy that. There's one other point I just really want to make, because I think this is absolutely critical to it. DOGE, this Department of Government Expenditure, or whatever it is, Department of Government Efficiency, I should say, has no oversight whatsoever by any democratic means. There has been no Senate confirmation of Elon Musk to do this. Trump has appointed him. There is no system by which you can check their work. They are doing whatever the hell they like with zero accountability whatsoever as part of American democracy. It's unbelievable.
I think you can make an argument for saying the newly elected president, who's talked about cutting government waste, is going to look very carefully at how America spends money overseas. That is easy pickings for Trump, right? And we were hearing from his press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, going through a list of some of the things that this department spends money on.
$1.5 million to advance DEI in Serbia's workplaces, $70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland, $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap. Our federal government. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so that music, we should explain, was put on the clip by Elon Musk himself. He's a big fan of Caroline Leavitt's list here. As you'd expect, there is a nugget of truth in each of these different areas that she's itemised. So yes, America is spending some money in Serbia's workplaces. Yes, they are giving money to the arts in Ireland. When they talk about a transgender opera in Colombia, I think they mean that they are giving money to Colombia. There is a transgender character in it. So of course you can find elements, tiny elements that are ringing true. But I think the bigger question is, if they wanted to itemise, if they wanted to go through and find wasteful spending or spending that they thought American voters didn't want to put in, you would sit down, compile a spreadsheet and say yes to this, no to that, yes to this, no to that. They haven't done that. They've literally frozen everything for 90 days. There are projects like prison guards looking after ISIS prisoners who have now had to leave their jobs because they don't know what to do for the next 3 months and they're not getting paid. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has had to step in and start turning the taps back on for some of the life-saving treatments. And I think the real question here is what is at heart for Trump. And my sense is he's waiting to see if anyone stops him. He's waiting to see if Congress puts up the guardrails. He's waiting to see if the Supreme Court stops him, because if they don't stop him on this, he'll go on to the Department of Education. And after the Department of Education, we've already seen him do it with the Department of Justice. We've already seen him do it with the rule of law and law enforcement officers who were actually working on convictions for the January the 6th convicts. I think that's what's at stake here. Trump is actually picking off the easy ones now. Who's going to complain about foreign aid? Oh, it's fine. We don't want to spend money in Colombia. Fine. But if nobody stops this, where does it go?
That's the point. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that Richard Painter, who was the chief White House ethics lawyer under George W. Bush, a Republican, has said, just in terms of the kind of just in terms of how different this is to anything we've seen before. He said, I've never seen anything like this, never in the history of the country. He's talked about the idea that Musk is setting up a shadow government, right? And as John has said, the problem with that is that the oversight, the congressional oversight, does not exist. He's not an elected official of the government. He's not been confirmed by the Senate. He's got this special designation at the moment as a special employee of the government, which is murky and which is weird.
You can do, I think, 100 days. It's a bit like being a non-dom. You get to 100 days free work.
Have you seen the offices they've got? They've moved beds in there so they can all sleep overnight.
Which is exactly what he did with Twitter.
Exactly.
And I think Emily's point is exactly right, which is that, and this is where, I mean, I think this is disturbing. I think it's worrying. I think that, of course, you'd want to see federal waste sort of clamp down upon. That's good. It is a massive bureaucracy.
That was the vote winner.
That was the vote winner, and I can totally understand the voting impulse for that. But ultimately, these things in a democracy have to be done with democratic accountability at its centre. And I think, actually, what is clear is that Congress, which has just become a rubber stamp for the Trump administration for the moment, isn't going to do it. Trump is not going to do it until such time as Elon does something that pisses him off. And I do think that if he is successful here, to go to Emily's point, yeah, look, there aren't going to be that many voters, certainly not MAGA voters, who could care less about what happens with USAid. In fact, they'll welcome it. They'll like it, fine. But he's talked about, Musk that is, cutting $2 trillion out of a $6 trillion federal budget. Now, the fact is, whether he likes it or not, you cannot do that without actually getting to grips with what the US spends most of its money on, which is not USAid. That's just a rounding error in the grand scheme of things. It's less than 1% of total spending. You've got to do something about entitlement benefits, what they call entitlement spending. You've got to do something about healthcare. And good luck with that. Good luck with that, because it's fine messing things up and breaking things in that Silicon Valley tech way with stuff that most voters don't care about. As soon as people don't have their social security benefits properly, as soon as they start losing access to healthcare, as soon as senior citizens there start to have problems with Medicaid, then you're in trouble. And I think this is where it's going. It's a political liability for Trump in the long term.
Yes, but the lack of any opposition at this stage, I still think. I mean, you've made the point, Emily, and Lewis, you've underlined it. I'm going to do the same thing. There have been all these inspector generals that are meant to hold government departments to account. They are the independent watchdogs. They have been fired. You're meant to tell Congress 30 days in advance if you're going to make any changes to the oversight mechanisms. Has Donald Trump done that? Of course he hasn't done that. He's just done it. And no one is making a noise. Everyone is rolling over. And it's corporate America. It's political America. It is the courts in America. No one is doing a thing at this moment to raise a raise a red flag and say this is wrong.
Not everyone has rolled over. I want you to listen to this clip by Ilhan Omar. Now, she is a Democrat. She's part of what they used to call the squad, the very left-wing, the sort of loud agitators. In a way, everything she's saying is what you would expect her to say. But listen carefully, because I think she might be onto something.
We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are. This is what the beginning of dictatorship looks like. When you gut the Constitution and you install yourself as the sole power, that is how dictators are made. What Trump and Elon and all of their cronies are trying to do is take away the constitutional power of Congress.
I mean, just as well on the aid point specifically, I mean, there's a lot of people talking about an oligarchy, right? I mean, what this looks more like is a plutocracy, right? This is a government by the rich for the rich, because there is something particularly galling, right, about, and just the irony just being spellbinding about the world's richest man, literally
money from the poor.
world's richest man going into the USAid office and stopping all money flowing to the world's poorest people. I mean, irony is dead.
Honestly, I have, he called them crooks. He called the people who ran the department crooks. Has he ever been to any of the places in the world where USAid operates? I mean, I've seen it on the ground in Afghanistan, Iraq, all sorts of bloody places around the world, and good luck to them doing that work. And the idea that this is kind of the great celebration of MAGAism, that you stop this, whereas it's always been bipartisan support that has helped USAID, because they believe you stop wars if you are helping these populations manage their own affairs. And, good luck with tearing it all up.
I mean, I'm sure some of this aid will reflow. I'm sure some of it will come back. But I think this speaks again to the mechanism of an autocrat, that Donald Trump wants to turn everything off so that he becomes the benefactor.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.